talking about, it's UFC 280, right?
280.
UFC 280. We promised you a big show for this one. Not one, but two guests. We've got Trevor Loken, friend of the show, soon to be professional MMA fighter, making his boxing debut for Global Legion here soon.
Not happening.
Oh, that's not happening? That's awesome.
Yeah, we're moving his pro debut to the December 10th card for MMA.
But it will be MMA.
But it'll be MMA. Yeah. So
awesome.
there was supposed to be...
And I'll probably be commentating that show, I hope.
Oh, that's perfect.
That's in the works, too. So, and then we have Leek, who's been training at Hometown for how long?
About a year and like 2 months.
Okay. So watching MMA for 2 years, training... Mostly Muay Thai. You had your first jiu-jitsu class literally this morning with me.
I think this morning was my second jiu-jitsu class. I did one at the old gym.
Cool. With Saeed, I guess?
Yeah, with Saeed.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
He taught me how to shrimp.
Trevor went 5-0 as an amateur. We talked about several of his fights on the show when he was getting ready for Kevin Peralta, and the other fight, the fight before that as well, was one of the Muscat kids, right?
That's Titus Moore was before.
Titus Moore, yes. Okay, cool. But yeah, you guys know we love Trevor. Super dominant fighter on the amateur scene. Can't wait to see what he does pro. I just wanted to kind of give Trevor a chance to talk about himself a little bit because he is kind of a quiet presence on fight night. But from what Trevor's told me, from what this Trevor has told me, you pretty much grew up on the mats, right?
Yeah, I mean, I started just coming in with Jeffrey back in the day. My older brother Jeffrey was a pro fighter, amateur fighter back in the day. Never went pro, but he was 9-2.
Yeah,
he stopped and
won a couple of amateur titles or
one title.
One amateur title.
I think it's one of the pictures in here, right?
There's a couple Jeff pictures up
here. That's awesome.
But growing up through middle school was just. That's all I knew was, going to see Jeffrey's fights and watching him train and everything. And he got me into wrestling in high school. And, after being in wrestling for a little while, I hopped over to Trevor's gym. We were training in the Blue Room back in the day.
Legendary.
And just,
literally showed up with, he was like, I just want to spar. And I just went, Jeff, you're cool with this. Because knowing your brother, I was kind of just like...
Yeah, you've told this story a couple times to me.
Where it was like 16-year-old Trevor, where I was like, all right, gloves and shin guards, you have a mouthpiece? Nope. And I was like, guys, the kid has a mouthpiece, and you just went, doesn't matter. And I just went, fuck, okay, go. And then, you stepped on the mat, and you were just swinging with pro fighters from day one. And it was, down the middle, and it wasn't, big looping shots. You knew, oh, I need to punch that way. And you had that
back then. It was just, I wanted to be in shape for wrestling season. I'd go in the off season, spar with the guys, and then wrestling season was its own thing. So I didn't expect to take it, so far at that point. And when I went up to App State and started training at Boondocks, my coach there was just like, you seem like you have experience. Let's get you in a fight, and here we are now. So.
Yeah, so when you were going to App State, you kind of were training with a whole new group of people, a whole new environment, separate from the people you came up with. Did you kind of go over there and immediately start jumping up your level?
So it's funny. When I went in for my first striking class there, and Cody Rowling, who was my coach for my first MMA fight, I jumped in with the beginner group. They split us off. They were like, if you feel like you're a beginner, if you feel like you're more advanced, you go to this side of the room. I just walked over to the beginner side. I'm like, this is my first real striking class ever, because I'd only been
you only came
guys
to sparring. Yeah, I couldn't get you into a class.
So I didn't realize where I was on the totem pole, so to speak. And he walked over after 5 minutes of drilling, and he was like, you don't belong here, and pulled me over to the other side. Maybe after 2 weeks. He said there was a card upcoming in Bristol, Tennessee, and was asking if anybody wanted to fight. And I was like, I want an MMA fight, put me on. And that's
you were going to school at the same time?
Yeah, I was going to App State just for business management at the time. And, I just kind of, every day after class, I'd ride my bike to the gym, spar at the gym for a little while, and then train luckily, the school's gym was right underneath my dorm room, so I was always training and just hopping over to the gym. It was great. I love training up there, but they didn't really have that big of a facility or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's probably only like 1 or 2 guys there that can
they had monster
guys.
grapplers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're really well known.
I definitely have heard the name a lot when we do like Fight For and a couple other shows. I believe they've sent like guys through for combat jiu-jitsu and stuff. So I've heard
a lot of combat jiu-jitsu guys.
Oh yeah, that's what that makes sense. That makes sense.
Super deep in grappling, and their Muay Thai guys were really good. They had a few like really good Muay Thai guys and a couple of MMA fighters at the time that I was up there. But it was also nice because after like all the classes and stuff, they'd have App State Jiu-Jitsu, and so App State's wrestlers would come and grapple, and so we'd get wrestlers in there, high level, D1 college wrestlers that were grappling too. So definitely a really good place to train starting out.
App State's not a name for universities you hear brought up a lot when it comes to wrestling, but I've wrestled with a couple of their guys. Like I've trained with a couple of guys that have come from that and are getting into jiu-jitsu after, like when they move back here or whatever, and they're fucking super solid
wrestling camps.
I couldn't tell the difference between
those are
we were talking about Vitali, that guy who hangs out with Adley.
They're buddies from.
He went to App State, and I honestly, for a guy his weight class, I couldn't tell you the difference between him and a guy from Duke or a guy from NC State.
Oh yeah,
he's fucking skilled, So I'm sure there was some really sick grappling rounds up there. Did you go 5 finishes? I'm having trouble remembering.
Yes, it's been 5 fights, 5 finishes. First 2 were second round. The last 3 have been first round.
And now that you're
going to
going
Rufus Sport.
Oh yeah, I was about to ask.
Because I can't remember. Like I remember, like one day you were just like, I'm going to Rufus. Like you were going. Like you were kind of like, I'm going out there, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, it was in 2018 or 2019. It was the year I turned 21. My buddy Mike decided he was gonna go somewhere, and he had, decided on Rufus Sport simply because you go to American Top Team, they're recruiting guys from high level wrestling.
It's like
schools.
a college. It's like a college recruitment process.
They're recruiting guys who have like super high accolades in specific martial arts to come and start doing MMA, and he thought we'd get overlooked at American Top Team or Team Alpha Male or wherever, whereas Rufus Sport had a couple of champions that were just kind of like homegrown. They didn't really have a singular thing they were great at, like Anthony Pettis. He was a self-made champion. He wasn't great at any one thing.
Had
before
good
he started
grappling,
MMA.
good striking.
Yep.
His biggest strength was his creativity.
Yeah. So we decided to go up there thinking we'd definitely get more like mat time in and more focus on us, and we did. And it was great. We stayed there for a few months, 4 or 5 months. Mike ended up not being able to continue, and when he moved back down, I decided to just move back down too. But I mean, that place was insane experience.
Yeah, I was gonna say those 4 months there probably felt like a year anywhere else in terms of how much you leveled up.
You're sparring every day,
It was hard sparring.
Hard sparring for what you're used to around here. I mean, I haven't been to any other pro gyms like Team Alpha Male or anything. But from my experience, I spar pretty hard for around here, and for the type of sparring you get around here, you go up there, it's a whole nother world. I mean, they're cracking each other every day. You have hard sparring days on Mondays and Wednesdays, where you have to wear headgear, 16-ounce gloves, and then the rest of the days you're sparring with MMA gloves, still mouthpiece and everything. Like you're getting cracked. It's definitely hard.
And you see it creates its own culture of like fighter. Like each gym does have its own way. And gyms like that, like you have to be that kind of fighter to still get up there. And that's why Anthony Pettis still became a champion, because those rounds are champion making fucking rounds.
You also see what the coaches, the head coaches there, Duke, Rufus, what they're looking for.
And you were very complimentary of the other guy. Who's the big bald guy with the beard? What's his name? Kutchman. Yeah, you always spoke really highly of him, and he seems to be like a guy that he doesn't want to be in the spotlight. He was helping a lot of fighters there. You were really highly on him.
I only spoke to him a few times. Obviously he's in there every day coaching all of us, and he'd make comments, but I had only spoke with him a few times while I was there. But he's, great striking coach, very hard, like definitely like a hardened boxing coach, old school, type of coach. I liked the whole experience. The coaching was good. The sparring was hard, a little bit harder than what we would have thought going up there. It's, if you don't want to be a pro fighter, it's not the place to be.
Yeah.
It's definitely that kind of place. So.
Well, now that you're going pro, I know you're working a little bit over here, but you're also getting rounds over at Battleborn all the way in High Point, right?
I haven't been there in a couple weeks now, but I was going there pretty consistently, and I plan to keep going there pretty consistently. Kelly's
I think that has
awesome
potential
coach.
to be one of those rooms.
Yeah.
Oh,
like
yeah,
it's a room that's full of people that are just very, very high level and only seem to be getting better.
Well, they have people that are actually my size as well.
Yeah.
And the guys over there are great. They're friendly. They're very willing to have you on the mat and stuff, and they're willing to work around the times that I need to go there, which is awesome.
Especially for how far of a commute that is for you guys who don't live in this area. That's like an hour drive.
It's an hour and 30 minutes.
An hour and 30 minutes.
It's an hour and 30 minutes
there
for me
and then
there
another
and
hour
back.
and a half back. Yeah. That's,
I mean, but it's worth it. Just for the atmosphere, the type of gym that it is, it's a great space, brand new.
Yeah.
All the bags.
It looks crazy in there.
Yeah, it's such a great spot.
It looks like a very
nice
high level
gym.
facility for sure. And I'm sure he'll have more. I know Cameron Sandoval moved out here from where he was in Reno to train here at Battleborn. So I'm sure that more guys.
Yeah,
like
he brought a whole stable with him from the get go.
I'm sure he'll have more people move out here to join his gym because, like you said, he's a super high level coach for sure.
We'll probably see a lot of people probably migrating up from South Carolina soon. Like that's where he got his fighting start was around South Carolina and conflict.
Yeah, I honestly think that South Carolina has done a lot these past 3 years to make themselves like.
Well, it's because they stayed steady through the pandemic.
Well, yeah,
like they really got their shit together.
Honestly, they took advantage of the fact that speaking of just comparing the two, not saying they took advantage in the sense that they did this on purpose, but they were in an advantageous position with not only the pandemic, but because North Carolina not having a commission at all, and for how long that's taken to be resolved. They've really kind of stepped up. And,
is that resolved now?
Fuck no.
I mean, it's
right?
resolved. I mean, they have.
There's a bandage on it, but it's starting to show blood again.
Well, people are okay. So my faith in the system is being restored because now people are on the board and they're meeting, which means they're being paid. And if the government is paying, they usually expect something. It doesn't have to be a full MMA card. Just something that says we're moving in the right direction.
Do you guys have a plan of action? All right, here's $1 million more.
So we don't even have like a boxing commission.
We did it for the past 2 years.
And you even remember that from back in the day growing up. Like Jeff and I were always on the road. Like when he started to fight again, the commission had shut back down. So that's when we started going down to South Carolina more.
Yeah, and it's always
we were on the road to
like
Virginia.
It's always been that way.
And when like Jeff came to the gym, like we were taking guys up to Virginia, and he was like, "What the fuck?" And I was like, "Yeah, we couldn't have any MMA fights."
Actually, this weekend, I know that they're called the North Carolina Combat Sports Authority. That's the name of the new commission. So they're actually hosting a referee and judge certification and training at the Highway Patrol Center. So if there's going to be people that are qualified as judges and referees, you can only assume that almost all the pieces are in place for them to have MMA again.
Hit up.
And Homegirl is there.
Kevin.
Whatever her name is. The head commissioner from the last commission is
Indica?
She's on the new panel as well.
Yeah, Shirley Mitchell was always around.
She always has those inspectors,
Yeah.
and she knows they're ready to go. They just have to get recertified under the new shit.
I wonder if they get Kevin McDonald down. Do you know he's ref a bunch of UFC and Bellator
Yeah,
fights, and like
I know Kevin
he and I have
McDonald.
met a bunch of times. Like they bring him down a ton.
He was just on this weekend. He was just on the card this past weekend.
Yeah. So man, I wonder if we can get him to stop by. Oh, I love that fucking guy. He's a fucking lunatic. I love him.
I'm sure he's got some crazy stories.
Oh,
it's
unreal.
He's reffed all over the world too.
And
when we talked to our friend,
started in when New England was just like they were still underground fights. Like he was fighting,
right.
And he and Billy Dowie met at like a fight down in Louisiana in like the '90s or some shit. Like,
that's how far you had to go to get a fight.
He has some wild fucking stories. Yeah.
Leek, how'd you get into training?
So I have a friend Chubbs, and he does comedy. So he wanted me to come and like record him. So I was recording him for his first time. Trev was in there with a Muay Thai shirt on. I'm like, I'm watching MMA.
That was the mic I was hosting at the time.
Yeah, you were hosting it. I think it was at Gatsby's.
Oh, yeah, right next to the Raleigh Wrestling Room.
Yeah.
So I see this guy with a Muay Thai shirt on. I'm like, I've been watching MMA, been watching UFC. I want to like train. I know I can't fight. It's like no surprise to me. Trev says come by the next day. I came by the next day.
And that's when I was like, oh shit! Like I even told you,
that,
like,
you know,
oh, you showed up.
Like
like,
someone, I was gonna say that never happens when somebody's like,
Trev,
yeah, I'll come to a train.
Not shown up to a practice.
Like everyone ever.
Yeah, like, but no, like that shows, like that speaks volumes.
Yeah, it
like
does, man.
when someone says they're gonna show up and they show up the next
fucking
day, you're just
do.
like, oh fuck, okay, this kid's in it.
Yeah.
Like,
I showed up the next day. He was like, dude, you said you had a little boxing knowledge. Your boxing is shit.
Yeah.
Where'd you get this boxing knowledge?
Yeah, it sucks.
like, that's also why I think we got along. Like,
yeah, and I was like, okay.
Yo, but
honest,
like, Leak, no, like, and it's like, Leak hears it. I say that to everybody.
Yeah.
I'm like, yo, okay,
I've heard you say some shit like that to Piper before, and I'm just like, damn. Like, you know if Piper's getting it, you know, it's bad.
I'm sweet to Piper. I'm just like, Piper, you're fucking this up. And she's like, I know. Like,
I know.
And then we fix it.
So went there. He had me come probably like an hour before class just to kind of show me like some basics. And then ever since then, I've just been wherever he's been at. I've been there. Yeah. At the beginning, I was training like twice a day, like all 3 days, and then I started working a lot more. So I've been just trying to get back on a solid like training schedule.
Yeah, and I know that right before the show started, we were talking about our grappling class this morning, and you were like, I now know enough to know I don't want to do MMA. So I just was wondering for people who might be watching, what are your goals with training? Just be in better shape, know how to defend yourself? Or?
So I'd say my biggest goal is definitely just the discipline itself.
Yeah.
When I don't train, I can see how it negatively affects my emotions.
Start cutting corners in other parts of your life.
Right.
I do the same thing. Yeah.
But also, like, the way that I interact with people. Like, when I come get punched and kicked, it's like, okay, well, you're not punching and kicking me, so it doesn't really matter what you say to me.
Yeah, it kind of sets the bar for a day, you know, kind of.
If you start the day off getting hit in the face, the rest of the day is a fucking cakewalk, man.
Yeah, and also, like, if you have night class, you know, sometimes if you have shit that's bothering you during the day, you
get it
like,
out before you go
just
home.
hold into it I'll just hold on to this feeling until night
You
class.
will
I'll rip
never
it all the fucking
not
time.
see someone in here smiling. Like,
It's
you
true.
and Anish were elbowing each other in the face last night, and everyone's just like a couple kids on the playground, but like fucking getting at it.
Being in
like,
here is it's a lot like being on a jet ski. You know, it's hard to smile. It's hard not to smile when you're riding a jet ski.
No, absolutely.
And for the people who enjoy being on a mat, it is like that. This is it's awesome that you're training, and I know you've been watching UFC for a while, so we wanted to have you on to talk about UFC 280, and now with the introductions out of the way, we can go ahead and start getting into this card.
A bunch of like,
Yeah.
that's a bunch of Dagestani fill-ins. Like,
Yeah.
like Khabib's like, I get all cousins and friends on card.
All right. So yeah, UFC 280.
I'm not wrong.
Talking about the prelims here, Trevor just made a very good point. It does seem like it's the Dagestan show here on the prelims here. 5 canceled fights, you know, between all the things they tried to make. A lot of Europeans, a lot of Russians, a lot of OV ending last names on this one for sure. But there are a couple of interesting matchups. It gets kind of interesting towards the top. I mean, this is a very, very top-heavy card. Like,
Very
extremely,
top-heavy. Like,
for how stacked the main card is.
The top 8, like I was talking
Dude,
about,
do you
are all great
remember-
fights. The rest of these fights, I'm just like, dude, we're going to be able to see a bunch of wrestle fucking going on. Like, these last names kind of just let you know, like, all right, we know what we're going to see on the undercard. Like, I think it looks pretty one-sided.
So
That's what they like to do, at least.
this, would you guys say that this is the most stacked UFC card of this year?
As
By
far as
far,
like the
yeah,
main
by
pay-per-view
far,
card.
right?
Yeah, the
By
pay-per-view
far.
card,
Yeah,
right?
It
Yeah,
was gonna
definitely.
be. It was set to be even more stacked. They split the cards up.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
that's right.
That's true.
So
Well, I always
but
think
definitely.
about, when I think about a stacked card, I always think about UFC, Madison Square Garden, St. Pierre versus Bisping. That's a fucking stacked card. And the prelims for that card are like as good as a fight night
Yes, I remember that.
on any
Yeah.
other
That
show,
was
right?
one of those like top
Open
to
St.
bottom
Preux
perfect fight nights.
versus Corey Anderson, Walt Harris versus Mark Godbeer, James Vick in his height of his success versus Joseph Dovey. That's just the
Prelims,
regular prelims. Curtis Blades versus Olynyk on the early prelims. Ricardo Ramos getting a win by knockout on the early prelims. Like, you look at this card and you're like, damn, it's all that top layer. They clearly only give a fuck about making people pay the $75 for the pay-per-view.
Yeah.
They don't really give a shit about the rest. They got all these guys from the Contender Series that they can pay 10 and 10 and tell you to fuck off back to Dagestan. You know, it's not like it used to be, but I'm glad we're getting at least for how stacked this card is compared to all the other cards we've had this year.
Yes.
The matchups are also very compelling and interesting. They're not just hype matchups that are one-sided for one reason or another. They're actually like very, very interesting and compelling matchups. And we'll talk about that when we get to the main card. Like I said, the prelims get kind of interesting when you get to Volkan Ozdemir versus Nikita Krylov. Nikita Krylov is a monster. He kind of looks like a Russian Jeff Dahmer.
Yes.
But Ozdemir looked so improved in his last fight.
He did.
He
showed patience. He knows, so he understands. He's like, oh, if I have some patience, I still have fast hands. And he's understanding the importance of fighting 5 minutes the whole round. Like, he's knowing, like, oh, I can't just keep looking for the one thing at a time. When you have the nickname, like, what, lights out or time out, time's up, something silly. He's always,
no time.
Sorry, no time. I'm like, cool, good, but once you've then tasted like that top level, you're like, oh shit.
Yeah, once you get wrestle fucked by Daniel Cormier, it's over, you know.
Or it's like you're getting stopped in the second and third rounds as like you're finishing
Against
people
Anthony
in the first,
Smith,
getting stopped in the second and third. Then it's like, man, you have to start making those adjustments.
Remember when he first came on the scene? He was fucking one punch KOing everyone.
Exactly, and that's why. And like now it's like, but now he's like, oh, I'm fighting the whole time now. And he fought the big Irish guy,
Paul Craig,
or Scottish.
Paul Craig.
Sorry, Scottish.
Yeah,
Scottish.
You almost had two islands rise up against
man. But no, like he was very patient the whole time. He knew he was like, oh, I'll just let this guy do whatever the fuck he needs to do, and that'll just play in my favor. Like that goes a long way.
And I think that fight IQ was probably one of his shortcomings in the past. And
this is going to be one of those. This is really going to set the precedent for the next fights. Like the whole undercard looks like a wrestling fuckfest.
Yeah, it does.
This fight looks like, because Nikita Krylov, like, he's another guy. He has a good bit of experience, and he knows how to fight like a veteran now, even at a young age.
And he can stand and bang,
he's
too.
A young
not
Russian.
just a
He can stand and bang, So I really think that, like, the later this fight goes on, Nikita's definitely going to keep taking over. Like, Volkan has to kind of go back to that one punch to beat someone like Nikita.
I
the
agree.
longer the fight goes on, so I'm kind of curious.
Because Nikita's kind of a brawler, too.
Yeah, like, if like the thing that sucks about Volkan is that, like, I like his growth, but you can't show that kind of growth in this fight. You have to put this fucking guy away, because he also has Nikita is the younger guy, and he's also way more durable than Volkan. And I think Nikita knows. He's like, bring it. Like, I'll be here in the second or third, and that's when I'm really going to get you. Like, Nikita just knows when he's going to fight the best in a fight.
Speaking of wrestling fuckfest, we were talking before the show about how the Dagestani system is so effective, but you find it to be like the most effective to least entertaining ratioed form of fighting.
Well, it is. It is. And it's proven to be. I mean, it's the by far the most effective form of fighting that we have right now, that we have mastered on the planet. You know, if you put a wrestler up against any other type of fighting, the wrestler's usually going to come out on top, depending on, like if you put the same body weight, same body type up against each other.
Yeah,
once
statistically,
a striker, wrestler's going to win. It's sad though that's the least, it's the least entertaining form of fighting to watch that we have. It's terrible because people who don't know what they're watching hate it. Yeah. Absolutely hate it. If you really know what you're looking at, it's super super interesting. You see all the little subtle details that no one else sees. It's very interesting to watch it. You love seeing what you're seeing with the exchanges, and you can see how elegant and fast and athletic some of the exchanges are. But if you don't know, if you've never wrestled, if you don't know what you're looking at, it's terrible. It's like the worst thing to watch. It's fucking horrible. It's boring. You want to see somebody just get cracked. You want to see somebody get knocked out. So,
do you feel the same way, like watching UFC as long as you have? Because you kind of came into the UFC at the height of its dominance.
Right.
Like Khabib was he was really, really dominant at the time you came into MMA, and now it's like we've got 13 Khabibs. 13 guys that are trying to emulate his style, rather.
That's rough, right? Because I kind of feel like it is a little boring. But I agree, like, the more, like, today when you showed me the Dagestani, leg lock and things like that, it just made me look at grappling so differently. And I wrestled a little bit in high school, too, so, like, I'm kind of a little used to seeing grappling. It's not, like, foreign to me. So for me personally, I think it's cool. It's all right. I don't want to see it 25 minutes, but if I have to, like, at least I'm not gonna be bored.
Yeah,
But
that's one
if
thing
no
I
one's
like
getting
about
hit-
Habib versus a lot of the other guys is Habib will just like straight up dive on finishes.
Yeah.
Like he's looking to get out of there. You know, he doesn't want to go to the full 25 if he doesn't have to, unless he's fighting like Alaquinta and he wants to like box him for the last 3 rounds, which was just weird. He also gave away a round to Connor trying to like box with him after he knocked him down. Kind of fell in love with his hands a little bit. But other than that, you know, when he has been grappling, especially in that match with Justin Gaethje where he was just fucking jumping on shit, got that mounted triangle. Yeah, I think maybe my bias is that I am overly educated when it comes to grappling, so I do get more excited to see transitions like that. Like, I probably popped off harder for Bo Nichols' rolling triangle than I did for like anything I've seen in like the past year. I was just like flabbergasted that a wrestler like that would like come in with the confidence to do a rolling triangle.
Well, I mean, just seeing Bo Nickel in the cage is such a like
mind fuck, right?
For everybody who's everybody who loves wrestling and has followed Bo Nickel for his years in college wrestling. It's like so awesome now to see him in the cage because you're seeing all these foreign guys with great wrestling, and now we're seeing this American-born kid like. You know,
he's what Scott Coker wishes Aaron Pico was.
And he's not a boring
That's what
wrestler.
they were looking for in Aaron Pico. No,
he's not a boring wrestler.
He's a really fun wrestler to watch.
He's a funky.
He hasn't had to wrestle.
Exactly.
He hasn't had to wrestle yet. That's what's really impressive. Is the fact that he just hasn't had to do it. You know, because he's got talent in other areas.
When you hear his interviews, I'm just like, oh my fuck, he really believes in himself. Like he knows. Like
he knows.
He's in a proven training room where he's like, you guys haven't seen shit yet. Like literally just you wait.
I feel so bad that
he talks about
Jamie
like
Pickett, bro.
Yeah, I know.
That's terrible.
Like I love Jamie. He's a good dude. And it's like, Jamie, why'd you take it? Like.
Oh, I mean, I think it's one of those situations where you know when you're in the spot that.
But
Jamie's
props to
in,
Jamie for taking it. I think like Jamie will still come out like. No, Jamie is going to come out and try to fucking fight Bo Nickel,
well,
but Jamie is still a fucking dog.
Look what happened to Crowder. When Crowder fought Greg Hardy, his stock was going to go up no matter what.
Yeah.
If he knocked out Greg Hardy, he would be hailed as a hero. If he got knocked out, it's like, oh, well, he got knocked out by Greg Hardy. You know, he's a big guy. He's an athlete. And then, like, for it to go down the way it did and for him to win by DQ over the scumbag Greg Hardy, it made him look even better. Like,
exactly,
and he got 2 more fights in the UFC off of that, you know? And I think that Jamie's in a spot where it's like, when you lose your last fight, you don't want to say no. You don't want to say no to anything because you don't know when they're just going to hand you your fucking papers and tell you to get the fuck out of here and go.
Jamie did have one of the dopest upsets though for his UFC win.
I agree. Yeah. He looked. I mean,
he looked phenomenal. I was like, that's the Jamie we all know.
Yeah, you're like, this guy is pulling the trigger now.
Yes.
You know, sometimes in his fights he just doesn't quite
that
get
trigger,
to the
like his jab, he was firing. But yeah, man, I think like this will probably be the first time we see Bo Nickel get hit, but it'll still be Bo Nickel like just being Bo Nickel.
I don't really give a fuck about this Mahmoud Muradov fight.
He's taking
on Kyle Borralho, who is entertaining for sure and interesting. But one of the things I was talking to Leek about this morning was that, you know, like Trevor said, wrestling is statistically very effective. The reason why it's been stymied or stonewalled is because we've had a long enough time to where we've got certain responses, defensive wrestling tools. We've got Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu we can rely upon. We've got framing and elbows. We've got these things that kind of help us keep wrestling at bay. The problem with the Dagestani system is that it capitalizes on you doing all of the right things, or what you think are traditionally the right options. That's what they destroy the hardest, and that's why they've become so much more dominant. So we'll talk about this a little bit later when we talk about the main event, but I am inclined to believe that the Dagestani approach is a true counter to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu traditionalists.
Yes.
And you know, that could be a factor in this fight for sure, but it is definitely bound to be a factor in the main event later. But other than that,
it's just a positional dominance. It's where it's like Jiu-Jitsu, yes, is off the back. Wrestling is, yes, on top. And it just creates different openings.
Well, they grapple with extra limbs. Yeah. The Dagestanis literally grapple with extra limbs. They use their legs for things we would traditionally use our arms for, and that frees up their arms to do anything else. Like, you know, that handcuff position that I was showing Leek, it feels like the end of the world. Yes. It feels like it can't get any worse, and I've also got a free hand.
Yeah.
You know, that's how bad it is. The crucifix is as far as traditional grappling goes, the top side crucifix is the only thing I can think of that's even close. And I have my hips in the top side crucifix. I can make something happen. I don't have my hips in the Dagestani positions, you know. But other than that, I think that Bilal Muhammad versus Sean Brady is potentially interesting. Sean Brady's still undefeated. This is definitely
like Sean Brady's been someone that people on the East Coast have been watching for a long time.
You guys familiar with this guy at all?
I'm familiar with Bilal.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with
No, well, like Sean Brady, like I saw him fight for CFFC like back in the day. Like I got to see him fight
He's Boston,
live. And,
right?
like,
He's a Tiger Schulman guy?
yeah, no, not Tiger Schulman guy. No,
Where is he from?
no, I know he's like he hangs out like the Baltimore scene.
Oh,
stuff like that too, yeah.
Okay.
But no, like he's an absolute stud in jiu-jitsu from the area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, really good jiu-jitsu
He
guy.
like the grappling scene. Like if you grew up around like the U.S. grappling scene, like people have been talking about him for a while. Like,
Yeah, I remember-
and seeing a lot of grappling tournaments up north, and just being around so many jiu-jitsu people. Like he's been at it for a minute. Yeah, and I think that this is a great coming out party for him. But at the same time,
He's not got bad hands either.
not bad hands. Like he's surprisingly well rounded, and the confidence comes from like, yeah, let it go to the ground. I don't give a fuck.
I think Bilal's issue traditionally has been that his wrestling is a little too old school.
Yes.
His wrestling
Yeah.
is a little too like hold you in place, control you.
Sean
not a lot
definitely
of
Sean
urgency.
chains better. Bilal's gonna try and like
Scrambles.
fight.
Sean's scrambles are great.
Bilal fights one thing at a time, and Sean's like, okay, cool. Like we're on to the next thing already. Like that's how he does it, and I love seeing that. It's very
Based on
like,
your previous response, I can assume how you feel about Bilal.
Oh, I like Bilal.
Oh, okay.
I think he's come. Well, don't
He
get me
has
wrong, when
definitely
I say-
improved a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He keeps getting better. Yeah.
And now he's training with the Dagestan guys.
When I
Yeah,
say
he's
that,
at an AKA now. That
I
actually.
hate
Oh, I
the-
forgot about that.
Yeah, this will be his
That's
first
a-
fight with them.
Oh, that makes it way more interesting. I forgot about that. I just saw. That's right. Oh shit. That makes it a little bit different.
He's come a long way.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
If you look at
Yeah.
where he made his UFC debut, he's one of those guys that like for a while he won one, lost one,
Yeah.
lost one, and then he turned a corner and just improved so much, and he just started ticking up, and now he's like where he should be.
Yeah.
You know, this is a good fight for him to test like advancing in the division again because he's in a division that is very hard to get forward momentum in.
He's kind of like a welterweight Tito Ortiz.
He
Mainly
wishes.
because of like the head size, but like, and it's
so-
also like his wrestling style
Jesus
is like
Christ.
what you see him like. It looks like a Dodge Charger taking off the line. You see his body moving, his head has to catch up. Like
He
that's where
wishes he could throw
that's where
hands
he
like
misses.
Ortiz.
What was Bilal's last fight?
Wonder
Pretty
Boy?
recently.
Was Wonder Boy his last fight? No, Vicente Luque.
Yeah.
He wrestle fucked Vicente
Yeah,
Luque for
yeah.
5 straight rounds. And that's a hard guy to do that.
That is
to.
a hard guy to do that.
I think
to, yeah.
Luque is one of those guys like Trevor who really, really is not afraid to get hit to make it a fight.
Yeah.
Like he'll close the distance on you fast and take one on the way in just to be in your face. And if you can wrestle him and control him and keep him down, and like he's a guy who every time he gets in a fight, it's fight of the night.
Yeah.
And it's one side. It was very one-sided for Bilal. So,
That's right. I was like, ooh, this is pretty interesting. Yeah, Bilal's like experience could probably pull out the win. I really want to see Sean Brady just maul him.
Yeah, Sean's got a lot of momentum behind him, and
Yeah.
like we said, he's a really good scrambler.
Yeah.
So I think that it's very possible because when you're up against a good grappler, but your
That being
strength
said,
is
Bilal
also
by front kick knockout.
front kick
I'm
knockout.
kidding. I just,
Oh man,
That would be crazy, right?
if that happens.
it does happen.
I just think that like Bilal's strength in the wrestling invites the
Yeah.
grappling, right? Like when you're a wrestler and you're going against a jiu-jitsu guy, you're almost you have to be a much, much better wrestler than he is at jiu-jitsu to have it kind of play out in your favor because traditionally jiu-jitsu guys don't have very good takedowns.
Yeah.
But they don't really mind being taken down if
No.
they feel like they can sweep you, right?
Yeah.
So Bilal's got this
Well,
thing where he's going to be going into Sean's game just by implementing his own.
Sean is going to get a good feel of where to go to if he feels Bilal getting the takedown, and that's what I think is kind of interesting. And Trevor, do you see that with like, there's something unique where you're just like, oh, like I'm going down. You kind of know where to go if you feel you're going down. Like I remember that in like, I think it was your second to last fight. Or it's happened a couple times where you can feel like someone's taking you down. You're like, well, I need to go this way while I'm going down because you know where to get back up. But
we were talking about that where you reverse the throw on KP, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And then like Sean Brady kind of knows where he's like, if he feels like he's getting taken down from a body lock or he happens to be like losing balance on a single or double, he's like, I'm going to go this way, but pull myself in here to have a frame ready to go and get a step ahead. And that's something that like, that's what I see in Sean Brady that Bilal will have a hard problem dealing with. Like
It's
I
funny
feel
that
like
you
I feel like
mention-
Sean can get back to his feet, more than Bilal's ready for, which is kind of interesting about this.
It's funny that you mentioned Bilal's wrestling style being much more old school. With that being, like, because of that, I don't feel that he's going to be able to react to those situations as well. Whereas, like,
the Dagestani style reacts to that really well.
So
we're talking
about
wrestlers, Bo Nickel, and the Dagestani wrestlers and stuff. You're talking about wrestlers that have adapted to jiu-jitsu almost perfectly to do these, like, when they're falling, they know what way to fall, where a jiu-jitsu practitioner won't be comfortable. Whereas old school wrestling is like, just I'm gonna sprawl, I'm gonna
not get taken down.
Exactly.
Like, and it's like me, I'm like, man, fuck that.
You have to fall into the positions correctly, and you have to fall into them almost incorrectly. It's sometimes to really stun people, to know, for strict jiu-jitsu practitioners aren't going to know what to do with a very funky wrestler, but they're going to know exactly what to do with a traditional wrestler.
Exactly. Like, especially off of, like, hip tosses and stuff like that, when it's body to body, a lot of those guys are used to, like, your body's going to stay right there. But then they'll hit the ground and it's like, where the fuck your hips go?
Well, it's
and
also what
they get stuck. They get stuck, like, they're coming out their shoulder and it's like, you squirrely fuck. Like,
it's also what you learn in class. It's what you learn in a white belt or blue belt level grappling. It's like, that's the responses you get.
Well, it's also being in, like, a room that'll, like, help you cater towards, like, what you're good at, what your good natural habits are.
Yeah. So, how different do you think his style will be now that he has the Dagestani training?
That's what we're gonna find out.
Those are the intangibles,
right?
That's
like what makes it a really interesting match.
How coachable is Bilal?
Yeah.
How well is he receiving the knowledge of? Because Habib speaks great English, but not all of the Dagestani guys do. And they say, whether you're Dagestani and you're Russian or you're English or whatever, that Habib's one of the best coaches. So I think that it's very...
His simple vocabulary and just, like, firm grasp of fundamentals and always being in action goes a long way when, like, whenever you see me talk to people that have, like, limited English, it's like few words as possible. And it gets a lot of results. Like,
I would say
they're using
that...
very simple English with a lot of good wrestling fundamentals.
I would say that, to me, this is more interesting than... the fact that, we've seen Habib kind of really come into his own since his retirement as a coach. Islam is his greatest protege, but he's got many, many guys, right?
Yeah.
But they're all his guys that probably came up with him in the fucking Russian bathhouses and stuff. So having a guy who's trained traditionally under different types of coaches in a different system and came up with a completely different background, moving there and trying to learn the system,
also
to me, is more interesting.
Having Javier there helps a lot of these English guys because Javier knows what Khabib wants out of people.
Right.
So Javier knows how to help guide people on the feet to where Khabib wants them for entries to takedowns. So I think like having Javier being around the mat room so much, like he can probably understand like the situation that Khabib wants. Like, I'm pretty sure Javier acts as a big translator for a lot of these guys.
But the big point is that this is where we find out if this system is teachable.
Yeah.
If it requires you to be up in the mountains of fucking Dagestan for the first 13 years of your life.
I think that's mainly the big thing.
And carrying fucking big rocks and sheep on your back,
Yeah. Right.
Or can you be a normal fucking guy and learn this? And to speak about one of Trevor's past opponents, KP, and the gym that he goes to, I would say that Carolina Combat Sports, Hayabusa, Gokor Chavichian, they're the only other system. Oh yeah, Hayabusa. Hayastan, thank you. Hayastan. Yeah, they're the only other major gym I know of that's working with some of the same elements and trying to actually teach their guys some of this stuff. And I think that a great example of a local fighter who does these things great is Brian Battle. When he's against the cage, he does a lot of stuff that you would normally only see Dagestani guys do. And Shamik Harvey on the ground he's a guy who came up wrestling in high school, and then when he got into MMA, he started learning this wrestling for MMA system that they have at Hayastan, and he's a guy that you can watch and be like, he's doing everything exactly right, and so I think it is a teachable system, but the majority of its success depends on how good Habib is at disseminating this information, because when I watch the videos of Habib and his father explaining these different positions and these different strategies they use along the cage, it's very clear to me that this guy, his father, Abdullah Map, he has this whole thing down, like this entire martial art in his head. Yeah. And he's like sharing it with like very, very limited small group of guys from the same country as him, from the same neighborhood as his son, essentially. So it's high level stuff that is from the most unlikely of sources. And sometimes niche knowledge like that is very hard to just give to people, even if they want it.
Right.
But we're going to find out. I think that, Bilal's reactions and how he controls the wrist in those situations are a big indicator, because to me that's the first thing they do that I notice that is different from most other people.
Instead of finding hooks and frames, they're just
yeah. They'll also do crazy stuff, like they'll reach through your leg and grab your wrist.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
it's so funny to do that to people when like people are like used to jiu-jitsu. I'm just like, you just grab in weird places. I know it sounds horrible to say out loud, but yeah, like they switch. I was like, ooh, that's interesting. That plays in really well.
Yeah, I think that'll be a big story on the commentary booth. How do you guys, as non-commentators, and especially you as a fighter, how do you feel about commentary for the UFC? Because I know Rogan's not going to be on this card.
I've never had a problem with it. I know a lot. Well, DC says some stupid stuff here and there. But with that being said, he's a great commentator. I think Joe Rogan's one of the most insightful commentators there possibly is, because he explains positions while they're happening to people who don't know what the hell they're watching.
Exactly.
And that's so important when you're talking about a combat sport, because most of the fans don't do it. Most of the fans of the UFC are people who have never trained a combat sport. They don't know what they're looking at. So it's very important to have somebody who's insanely insightful, knows exactly what they're looking at, but dumbs it down perfectly for the audience. So I've always thought that the commentating's great. DC could work on it a little bit, but that's, neither here nor there.
Yeah, it's been kind of hit or miss with some of the fighters switching over to commentary for me, but I think that coaches always make good commentators, because they're so used to explaining things in a way that can be easily picked up.
I miss hearing Eddie Bravo.
Dean Thomas is great.
Dean Thomas is
awesome.
Yeah.
He's really, really good in that role. And I've heard him do commentary for like fight nights in his local area, just like doing actual commentary. And he's very good at that too.
I think Felder's underrated.
Felder is definitely underrated. Bisping is, out of all the fighters, I think Bisping's the highest tier. And then it goes Felder, and then DC, and then all the way down here would be like Cruz. Like very, very close
you don't
to the
like
bottom.
Cruz?
Yeah, I just don't. He has to be with the right group.
Yeah.
And he has to be it has to almost be the right matchups. He's not good at making every matchup compelling. The thing about Rogan is, the reason Rogan's very successful is whether he's watching Conor versus Eddie in the center of MSG, or he's watching two drunk uncles in the parking lot of a Sheetz. You would not be able to tell the difference between his enthusiasm.
So enthusiastic.
He is like, every fucking exchange means the world to him.
He also keeps like a conversation going almost amongst the broadcasters.
I think John Anik's a great conductor of everything.
Anik's good.
Yeah.
Anik's also one of those guys who's come a long way. Very, very long way from just being like the B guy for Mike Goldberg. He's doing a lot of the heavy lifting now. And I think that he has the hardest job too. He has to keep up with the most data. He has to research the fighters like the other commentators do, but he also has to research all the market shit and all of the ads, and he has to have all the ads memorized. And when they cue him in his ear and they're like, all right, read the Modelo ad, he has to do it. Even if Jorge Masvidal's about to knock out Ben Askren with a flying knee. He has to do it.
They give him like a prompt or like a sheet to read off of?
He has a sheet. So usually it'll be a sheet, but there's just speaking from my experience of being on a desk with you, there's so little real estate on the desk that you have one sheet in front of you at a time. I need my fighter sheet. I need my matchup card or my matchup sheet in front of me. I'd rather memorize the ad reads beforehand. That's why when we did Conflict and they were like, we want you to hit these notes in the ad reads, and when we were in the coffee shop doing research, I was like, you just do fighters, I'll do ads.
Yeah,
and I just did the ads and just was like looking up the businesses and the name of the owners so I could like shout them out on stream. Just like going that little extra mile as like the other guy is pretty hard to do, but it pays off and it shows. Like if you ever look at Anik's Twitter, he's got a fucking filing cabinet like this of matchup cards. He keeps every one of them so that when somebody's about to have another fight, he can go and find your previous matchup cards and he can just pull up all his shit. And then he's got like a full fucking deck. Yeah, it's a really, really sick system. Anyway,
I nerd out about crazy shit.
Super high level, super top heavy main card for UFC 280 with some crazy ass matchups. Starting off with a women's matchup at flyweight, one of the toughest divisions in the world in terms of getting your name out there. Katlyn Chookagian taking on Manon Fiorot. And Fiorot is the girl who, in her last UFC fight a couple months ago, just put the smackdown on the girl who twerked at the weigh-ins.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how she got her name out there.
Yeah.
She's a beast. And,
no, man, she's a judo specialist from France.
Exactly.
Yeah, very tall. Isn't she like 5'11"?
That's
or
the thing
6
about,
feet tall or
that's
something.
the thing about
Her opponent is actually the tallest.
Caitlin's taller.
Woman in her.
Oh
her
shit! Oh,
division.
Manon's like 5'6". She seems so much. She fights very tall. Then.
Yeah.
She fights really upright. Then.
She's got 2 inches on her, which is a smaller height difference than is usually going to be in Caitlin's fights.
Yes.
Caitlin's gotten a lot of success off of being long and having a good
Just
jab.
being able to stay back and stay active.
Having a really, really good jab. You know, she doesn't really like knock people out or like rush them.
She fights like the bully on the playground, where it's like the hand on the forehead, and it's like, man, I just can't get her, and she's like, ha ha ha.
Her punches are very snappy. She
Very
put her
snappy,
whole
good
weight
balance.
behind it. Yeah.
She's good at making people like walk into punches, and she's like, you stay there, I'm gonna go over here, now come back to me, I put you there.
And when you're a judo person, you're probably constantly pressing in on a person like that and trying to find an underhook or an overhook. Trevor, you've been on the mat with a lot of different guys, a lot of different body types. When you're against a guy who's much longer than you, and I know you like to close the distance, what kind of games or trickery do you implement to try to get in there?
It's no trickery. I just use my face.
I know that's
Come on, get the target, get the target.
I watched enough of your
You're
fights
gonna
to know
get it.
that's for real.
With that being said, it's just multiple feints to shots to coming into body clinch. There's so much that goes into it.
Yeah, for sure.
Fighting taller people hasn't really been a problem for me because I'm pretty big for my weight class.
Yeah.
Whereas Peraza was like a little bit longer, I would say, just like slightly longer. But again, I crash into people, so I wouldn't really know. I wouldn't have much.
Quite literally sometimes. I remember the guy, the fight before him was like a clash of heads, right? Like
Yeah,
you literally
same.
went head
Well,
first into
I
him.
thought he might, be a little bit more weary. No, he just came right in for an overhand.
I think
just
you
like
had
I
already
did.
rocked
He
him too
crashed.
at that point.
Yeah.
Like you had already touched him at that point too. So you get touched really hard by a guy who's got good power, and you start kind of freaking out a little bit. You either start panic wrestling or panic throwing or whatever. I think you caught him in the middle of a big panic throw.
Yeah, that was a crash for sure. But
did you feel that one, by the way?
Oh no, no, not at all.
The Lokens don't feel anything with their foreheads.
Honestly, I didn't feel like I got hit at all that fight. The only shots I was like, whoa, that would have sucked was when I pulled guard, we hit the mat, and he squished me against the cage. I was trying to throw up rubber guard, and he swung really hard twice over the rubber guard, and it missed me by like a half inch and hit the cage. And I was like, okay, I bailed on rubber guard. And I got back up on my feet.
It's too close for my cough.
Yeah,
comfort,
I just didn't want to mess with it. But from what you're saying, I would just assume that throwing feints and good head movement, getting in on a taller opponent is the best way to do it.
She's good at swimming in behind her punches.
Yeah,
She comes forward well, and like she does a good job of like and I talk about this a lot with like boxing, is like you get comfortable like punching that shoulder over. When you're a judo person, you come offline, you can find which either hip to step off to. So she does a good job of punching in behind it. She's like, which way is this going to go to? Can I find it in? Can I find it? She'll punch her right hand over, and then sometimes get like her right leg past and go to body lock. So she's good about almost being able to, like, she's punching into a pummel. She's not always trying to punch to attack, which will really fuck up someone's cadence. Like, Caitlin needs someone to try and actually hit her in the face, and that's what keeps her back. Where Manon, like, she's kind of like, I'm not going to try and hit you in the face. I'm going to try and punch your chest, or I'm going to try and, like, she'll actually catch a person's, like, straight punch and then try to, like, still parry and go through. Like, it's a tricky range to play depending on the striker. But
what I noticed from her last fight is that she puts her Fierrote. It's hard to say. She puts her whole body in the punches, which could be an advantage and it could be a disadvantage. It makes me worry for her a little bit with such a
because you can still walk into it
crafty
like,
striker.
with such a precision striker, and with the way that she puts
you
her
were
punches
talking about
out, she
Caitlin's
just
jab
snaps.
earlier.
Yeah, Caitlin just snaps those 1-2s.
You've been around rooms where you're like, fuck getting hit by that.
Yeah, and if you throw your whole body into it, like she was throwing 1-2s with her whole body in her last fight, and if you put your whole body, out and extend past your hips with your head out there against a precision striker, you're gonna pieced up a few times. But
sure.
it could work out to her advantage. She thinks she's doing best and gets clocked by 1 or 2 of those. It's gonna be a bad
different
time.
night, yeah.
So, I mean, it's a toss-up kind of thing for me.
We talk about like stakes.
Every fight's a toss-up.
We talk about like high
I
stakes.
do not make MMA picks very well because I'm just like, I don't fucking know, man.
Yeah. I would say that I think the best you can do with MMA betting is often if you can break 50%, you're really good.
Yeah.
If you can break 50% as a consistent MMA bettor, you are doing really, really well as an MMA bettor because it's not like other sports. Like obviously with point spread and other things that you're talking about betting on football or basketball, there's all these factors and data and statistics that constantly point you in a certain direction. So it is more of a skill-based game. But knowing MMA that intimately requires more of a like intuitive knowledge than it does a statistical based like research, basically, right?
I feel like if you're going to Russian roulette, you're good at picking MMA fights.
And even then, you have your golden snitch. You have your golden snitch aspect of MMA, which is that like obviously you can just get knocked out at any time, even if you're much better than the other guy. You can be winning your fight. You can be up around against Jorge Masvidal, get your fucking foot caught in the cage, and Urbine.
You are still so mad about.
I mean, that's a fight that I lost money on. You know that I've said it before, and I say it again. That is a fight that I lost a significant amount of money on because Jake Matthews got his fucking foot caught in the cage. Anyway, we talk about stakes.
Jake
Ellenberger. So we talk about stakes, and unfortunately, because of the way flyweight is set up, every fucking matchup is high stakes because they're just looking for anyone they can to throw in there with Valentina. If they could get a fucking chimpanzee girl to make 125 pounds, they would put her in there with Shevchenko. Yeah. I mean, they're just looking for anybody to fight her at this point. Literally anyone.
And Kayla's already fought her.
Yeah, so you win this Fierro, third fight in the UFC, you might be fighting Valentina. Yeah, exactly. And they were doing that for Cyborg for a while. They were bringing in, Lena Landsberg was supposed to fight this weekend. She's one of those girls they brought in for Cyborg.
Yep.
And Cyborg demolished her, and they just kept her around because she was like, well, I can make 35. And I'm like, oh, okay, we'll hang her out. Yeah, we'll give you some fights at 35. You know, that's a very busy division, especially when you compare it to 15, you compare it to 25 or 45. Those are not very busy divisions. So if you can make both, you're very, very useful to the UFC. I think that's one of the reasons why Jessica Rose Clark may not be the best fighter in the world, but they've kept her around because she's really flexible when it comes to...
And she'll just fucking fight.
She'll just fucking fight, right. She lives in Vegas. It's very easy for her to make the drive, whatever.
Around the corner.
But speaking of high-stakes matchups, probably to determine one of, if not number one, then number two in the world for lightweight, which is the biggest division in the world, would be Beneil Dariush, who...
This is such a sleeper of a contender fight.
I agree. This would be a main event fight night.
This is going to make, if one of these guys fights for the title, not to be mean, they're going to have to put it as the co-main.
Dariush wins. I'm putting my choice out there. Dariush wins.
Okay.
Based on what I've seen. Gamrot's a beast, but I agree that Dariush is kind of overdue his flowers. People don't appreciate him.
He's really slept on.
He would have had a title shot.
He's the world's most dangerous dad bod.
He would have.
He's so loose. He's so well-rounded. Like he's definitely not like he is probably the least athletic guy in the top 10. But the work ethic and his well-roundedness, and he's like everywhere he goes, he just makes it into a fucking fight. Yeah. And that is so hard for people to deal with.
Yeah, he's tough tough everywhere.
Yeah,
I mean he hits wild submissions, he hits crazy knockouts. He's very athletic.
Do you think it being a 3-round instead of a 5-round makes it closer? Or do you think it'll be a really one-sided fight? Or do you think I think like Gamrot will be in there? Like
it benefits Gamrot.
Yeah. I think Gamrot's going to be like so. If Gamrot wins, it's going to be a horribly boring second and third round.
I think Dariush could have had a title shot years ago if he had not gotten knocked out by Edson 2 minutes before beating him on the scorecard.
Yeah,
he dominated.
That was
Edson.
One of those like everyone I remember like standing up and like everyone felt their hearts sink. Like it was a great knockout, but it was like, oh, not Beneil, he's so nice. But at the same time,
a very iconic knockout too.
Iconic, just that jump knee.
You know, it looked sweet. You know,
when you see a fight go out the window like with that little bit of time left, you're like, oh fuck. Like,
exactly. Especially for how dominant he was in the 2 rounds before that. I think that really, because you know we talk about it all the time when it comes to these big time weight divisions like 45, 55, but one loss there can set you back years in your career. And Beneil's been coming back for a long time. He's had some tough fucking fights, but I've never seen him get worse from fight to fight.
True.
That's one thing I really, really admire about him is that constantly.
He's at that like shit or get off the pot age.
Yeah,
like 33. That's like
it's so hard to walk away when you're as close as he is.
Exactly.
And when you're that close, you're like
every time you see him fight, you're like, I hope this isn't the fight where he starts declining. Like, because when you see that happen, you're like, oh no.
Well, it doesn't seem like he's had a single. Every time you see him in the cage, it looks like he's just that much more dominant.
I don't think he's had a major injury either.
Yeah,
which is very rare for a guy like him.
He's so experienced.
21-4 for him versus 21-0 or 21-1 with Gamrot. So it's like they're very similar levels of experience, but Gamrot, most of Beneil's wins come from the UFC. He's been there a long time.
Yeah.
Whereas Gamrot's kind of a
KSW
newer comer,
guy, right? Yeah.
So that strength of schedule for Beneil speaks volumes.
And we're gonna talk about that with like the main event. Like this is one of those things where it's like, Beneil's like time in at the top is probably what's going to get him through this fight. But I could still see Mateus. It's like one of those things where it's like he could just be the motherfucker on that night, and that's the tough thing about this matchup.
I think that Beneil versus Islam is not very interesting to me if that's a potential matchup that's down the road.
Well, like Beneil versus either of them.
Gamrot versus Islam's way more interesting to me.
Really?
Yeah, because Islam's kind of a physical specimen. Like he has the strength advantage in a lot of his matchups, and I think he would still have that against Beneil, but I don't know if he has that against Gamrot. And I'm very interested to see how technical Islam is. Like how because so far he's not needed to be very technical.
Yeah.
And
this
I'm
is
interested
first
to
time
see
fighting someone top 5, only one person top 10. Like
I have the same outlook on him as I do Khabib. Like I want to see what you guys look like when things aren't going according to plan.
Yeah.
I want to see how you fucking adjust. And I think Khabib's never really had to adjust except for like twice in any of the fights I ever watched. He had that brief moment where he was kind of worried about that guillotine from Dustin. As soon as he cleared his fucking head, he went right back to work. And I think like one other time I saw him get clipped. Michael Johnson.
Michael Johnson,
so Michael Johnson, that clipped him. It didn't really hurt him, but it clipped him.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see Islam tested in a similar way. Hamzat, I wasn't really big on until he fought Burns, and then I was like, okay, this is what this guy is a real fighter. He keeps fighting when he gets fucking hit in the face. Yeah. I don't know that about a lot of guys.
Hard.
That was a crazy fight. That was one of those fights where I was like,
that was a proving himself fight. It was I am good enough to be here in the top 3. Like,
I agree, 100%.
And that's what we as fans needed to see from him as well. Is he just mauling people who suck, or is he gonna stand up to the test of deep water? And he sure as hell did. So
yeah, definitely. And I would say that that's the one thing that we don't really know about Gamrot is like he's not had that opponent that makes people go, damn, this guy is really actually fucking legit. And Beneil is that opponent.
Yeah.
Beneil is that guy who, if you get past him, people know you're legit at this, especially at this weight class. Like we say, this is the most competitive and serious and deep weight class in the world. So if you're beating the number 3 guy with a name like him who's been around in the UFC, then yeah, you might be the next guy. But they've already announced who the next guy is. Did you know?
No.
It's going to be Alex.
Because he's the weigh-in back.
And no matter what, he's the next guy.
Really?
That's what I'm saying.
That's
fun. They're saying if they both make weight and they both make it to the fight, he's fighting whoever wins.
I love it.
And it's just like, damn, he's already.
Why not?
I definitely don't want to see him versus Islam.
No,
I don't want to see him versus
Charles.
Islam. I don't want to see him versus Oliveira. He gets chewed up.
He's small.
Volkov is small, and I'm not saying that he's not great. He's great. He's fucking awesome.
But Oliveira's a different animal, a different weight class.
I just want to see him versus Cejudo.
So does him
him versus Cejudo would be awesome.
Yeah.
So is the fact that he used to be 200 pounds like not even a factor?
It's just that like
it is.
It's the height.
It
has nothing to do with how big he is. The height difference is so big. We're talking about a striker like Oliveira. Oliveira puts people down, and it's slept on because he's such a good jiu-jitsu practitioner, a good catch wrestler. But he's got such a mean
We'll
definitely talk about that when we get to the main event.
Yeah.
But that's an underrated aspect of his game for sure. I think to go back to what you were saying, Malik, is that it does matter that Volkanovski used to be that weight. That's probably what gives him so much explosiveness is that he walked around with that weight for a lot of his life and his bone density and everything.
It allows him to take a fucking beating.
And he can take a beating. But he's not got the most crazy jiu-jitsu in the world by any means.
Ortega submissions,
but he just seems like he refuses to die. Like he seems like his superpower is he just refuses to lose, And there are some guys that are like that, but the thing about that superpower is that it never ever last.
True.
It can never last. And going up a weight class and fighting a guy like Islam or Charles is a quick way to have that taken from you.
A guy like Charles who doesn't seem to have,
who's vicious.
Yeah, and when you think you have him is when you don't.
Right. And Volkanovski's not known for like starching people either. No. Like he methodically beats you down.
Like through
over the course
4 or 5 rounds.
Yeah.
He's a 5-round fighter.
And so
I think thoroughly thrashed you those 5 rounds. Though.
I think him and Cejudo is definitely way more interesting. But yeah. I mean, I want to see, because I said the same thing about Cannonier versus Stylebender. I was like, Cannonier's one thing that he's got going for him is he's going to be fucking massive compared to Israel. And then they get to the weigh-in, and Israel's taller and longer and looks bigger. And I'm like, oh fuck! Like I got to see them standing next to each other before I go. I got to write Volkanovski off entirely because I think that Volkanovski is a more educated striker than both guys, but I think the grappling difference is way different than a guy like Ortega. Ortega's got great jiu-jitsu, but he cannot take somebody down to save his fucking life.
No.
He's just like McKenzie in that way. As soon as it gets to the ground, you're dealing with a world champion. But if you can just keep it on the feet, he's not going to be able to force you to go down to the ground. He can't. Like, all he can do is pull guard. The way he really used to get people is they would shoot on him.
Yeah.
Wraps up the guillotine, and now we're in a jiu-jitsu situation. Now I'm a world champion. But Volkanovski just never allowed himself to be caught in that situation like that. Ortega had to get really creative to even threaten submissions.
That's gonna be one of those fights where I'm just like, I hope Volkanovski's okay. Like, I hope he fights to fight another day after. If he fights Oliveira,
I get it.
I'd much
why
rather
can't they just
see
make
him against
Cejudo
somebody
happen?
it's not top level. You make the jump up. Let's fight Gaethje first. As somebody who's, I see that being a much more exciting fight. One, because they're both really, really good strikers. They're more like their body style seems the same. It would be like a better matchup, I think.
Yeah, that'd be a really good.
Yeah, Chandler versus him or Gaethje versus him would be very, very awesome and entertaining. And I think the only reason why they're fast tracking him is because it's like, what else do you do with the guy? He's cleared out his division 2 times over. He's beat the 2 best guys, and those 2 guys.
It's only fair to give him the title shot.
Those 2 guys have gone on to fight other people and show that they're still number 2 and number 3, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be like, okay, well, this guy's clearly a couple levels above. Maybe he goes up there, maybe he gets his ass whooped like Israel did. It just happens, and he can still be a featherweight GOAT if he loses at 55.
So, I feel like you mentioned Izzy. Do you feel like you would have more knockouts if people didn't respect his striking as much?
Yeah,
he has the power to knock people out.
100%.
But he has to have people engaged in his fight.
Right.
I don't think he has to. I think he has to brutally finish people. He doesn't have to have people engage with him to win.
Yeah, he knows how to stay on the outside and still pick apart.
The same thing happened to Anderson. If you go back and watch Anderson's fights, it got to a point where after the Forrest Griffin fight especially, where people were like, well, you can't just fucking stand in front of this guy. You gotta get creative. And some guys got really creative and were able to take him down, like Chael, and give him a really fucking hard fight. But some guys literally took that as I'm just not gonna engage, like Damian Maia. Right. And they just stood back. And I think that is happening to Israel, and he's reaching a point where it's he doesn't see a reason to change anything that he's doing.
He's winning.
And
when it's on the challenger to show a performance and to prove himself. It's not on the champion. The champion's just there to win this fight, and he doesn't.
That's not written into the rules of MMA, but it's kind of unwritten rule.
It's that unwritten rule of combat.
Exactly. If you're Israel, why do you want to get beat up? Why do you want to get in these tough exchanges? You don't want to be throwing super hard and get your opponent worked up and start throwing super hard back. You just want to pick them apart, win your fight, go on to the next one. I'm champ. Whatever. Make my money. That's me. And so a lot of people will put it on him you should be a more exciting fighter. No, you're already where you were an exciting fighter before you got there. Now that you're here, you don't need to be an exciting fighter. You just need to keep winning.
Yeah, especially in the UFC where it's when you're a champion, you literally have different power than if you're not a champion. You can be as good as Israel is and be the number 1 guy, not have the belt, and there's a lot of shit you're not getting. You're not getting any of the championship clauses in your contract. You're not getting pay-per-view points usually. You're not doing anything. And you think about him, in terms of active fighters, he's probably the most popular active guy that they have.
I can see that.
Connor's obviously way more popular, but Connor fights once every 2 or 3 years or once a U.S. presidency or something like that. So you don't really get a lot of money value out of him. They get a shitload of money value out of Stylebender. He sells pay-per-views. And if he didn't have that belt, That's a lot of free money on the table that, it's not the same. Ryan Bader talked about it when he went to Bellator. He was like, I'm not making show and win anymore. I'm making one flat fee to fight. So I can go out there and fucking fight my ass off and not worry about getting knocked out and losing half my paycheck. And I think that plays a lot into it when it comes to like boring fights in the UFC.
My next question would be, Trevor, you were talking about how since you know about wrestling, when you see wrestling, it's still interesting to you. And I feel like Izzy might be in that same position. I like train striking, so when he's striking and people are calling it boring, I'm like, these feints, these angles, these cuts are amazing. But like a normal person thinks it's boring.
That's exactly
and
right.
they're still
It's
striking.
an invisible wall.
Exactly
It's
right.
an invisible wall for a wrestler. It's like, shit, fuck, well, shit. There's a possible elbow or a knee.
Or a knee. Yeah. So it's still striking, and someone
It's a
can get
different
cracked,
level of it.
But they say it's boring.
It's super intuitive, but people, the like I was saying with it's the exact same thing, and you're exactly right. Is when you're watching wrestling and you don't know what you're looking at, it's super boring because you can't see every little minute detail that's causing a stoppage here where they're not really doing anything. You're not seeing all the little walls like you're talking about where if I do this, then they do this, so on and so forth. So people who don't know striking that well, they only know big bombs. They want to see the big bombs. They can't differentiate between all the little subtle things that are happening. The feints this way, the pawing this hand out means a chain of events is going to unfold. They can't see all of that, so they view it as boring because they want to see. Most UFC fans want to see big knockouts. They want to see crazy submissions. They want to see huge slams.
And I think it's also one of those things where it's like, if you don't like Israel already and you think he's boring already and you watch his fight and you sit there on the edge of your seat waiting for him to get knocked out the entire time, when that doesn't happen, you feel very upset.
Yeah, he does give you reason to be angry.
And it's like, I get it. I used to, when I was more casually into the sport, I kind of thought very similarly, but it's one of those things now where the more I watch and train, the more I just want the fight to be good. I just want the fight to be good. I don't really necessarily try to hope for one side or the other to win unless it's like a specific situation.
Right.
I just want to I just want the fight to actually be entertaining and not end with somebody getting like fucking eye poked and disqualified or whatever, whatever. Just something really anticlimactic and boring, But that being said, we can get into the fucking good stuff.
Speaking
and
of
we've kind of been in the good stuff, but this is the fucking good stuff.
Yeah.
Sean O'Malley versus Peter Yan.
Sugar Show.
The Sugar Show. Number 12 versus number 3 in the division.
It's a jump. It's a jump.
It is a jump.
It's a bit of a jump, but I would say we talked about this, me and Trevor did on the show, like kind of when we first talked about this matchup getting made, and also when him versus Pedro happened. I was like, the UFC is going to proceed however they think that fight went. If they think Sean was going to beat Pedro and made him quit, quote unquote, if they believe that narrative that Sean is selling, they will reward him as such. And this doesn't seem like a throw you to the wolves type of fight. This seems like a reward for beating Pedro Munoz. So while on paper he lost and he's still a number 12, I think they view him more as a number 8, number 6 guy where Munoz was. And that's why they're giving him Yan. And also, Yan is the best fucking matchup for him out of everybody in the top 5. And going further down into the top 7, top 8, it's the one guy who's not going to wrestle him. It's the one guy who's going to fucking box with him and stand with him. And I kind of like Sugar Show in this one.
He's a little good on his feet.
I think even you were saying that too, right, Trev?
What?
That you're picking Sean in this, or you want him to win, right?
So, the gambler in me wants to put all my money on Sean O'Malley, whereas the betting man wants to put it on Yan. Jan's the better fighter on all paper. He's the guy who's gone to championship rounds. He knows where he's at.
He was a former champion.
Exactly.
Former champion.
And he won the championship via dominant fucking beatdown.
It's such a money fight for them because it's Yan. Everybody knows Yan. Everybody loves Yan, and everybody wants to know how good O'Malley actually is.
Right.
Can he stand up to his big mouth?
Not a lot to lose for O'Malley either.
Exactly.
Nothing to lose.
If O'Malley loses this, he probably fights the number 8 or number 9 guy.
Exactly. It's such a win-win for
It's
him.
a great fight.
Cheeto again.
Or
That would be
back with
awesome.
Cheeto. Yeah.
That would be awesome. That's a fight that I think a lot of people want to see.
Sean
That
O'Malley
fight could sell out
Cheeto 2 would
every
be
time,
co-main on a pay-per-view, and he would make fucking bank if he got a 5-round non-title fight. Like he has such a win-win even if he loses.
I think it's a gamble for him, but I think it's a good gamble. I think it's the step he needs to take because he's amassed a huge following. Just him being the way that he is and the way that he conducts himself and picks his fights, does his business. I think this is a great opportunity for him to show if he is that good, one, and two, just getting to feel what it's going to be like to be in a fight with
one of the best in the world.
This is arguably the best or second best at the weight class.
Yeah. In one of the hardest weight classes.
In one of the hardest weight classes, yeah. I'd like to see a rematch between Jan and Sterling.
I'd love to see Jan versus TJ, honestly.
That would be...
and Dana did confirm that the winner of this gets a title shot.
Okay.
The winner of this is...
Oh, the Jan O'Malley fight gets a title shot?
The winner of this is fighting...
That's super cool.
Yeah, the winner of this is probably going to be fighting the winner of the main event. Or the co-main.
To jump way back 6, 7 years now, 8 years now, I think, before Conor had fought Jose Aldo, this is the way everybody felt about Conor, right?
Yeah,
he was the up-and-comer.
Right.
He was the guy with the big mouth. He really only had hands that, what you knew of. He was a good striker.
I think Mendez is probably the fight I think of, but only because he was tested in that fight.
He was tested.
Whereas Aldo is like, it didn't go down the way people wanted it to, so people will always say that was a fluke.
It was a fluke.
Whereas Mendez held him down and Conor got up and knocked him out.
The only reason I really want to kind of lean towards O'Malley with this is because of how good his pool 1-2 is. And
he's good.
There's a funny trend in boxing. The best boxers lose to a jab and a cross. They get so comfortable being so ahead of the playbook that they end up losing to the biggest basics.
There's another tool right down the middle that O'Malley has that I think is going to show up in this fight, and that's the front kick to the body.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
That push kick to the body is going to show up a lot.
Jan does a good job of trying to, spinning back fist into range and stuff like that. He does a good job of, when he comes forward, that head's not in the same spot, and he's always punching his way and staying busy. But Sean O'Malley, man, the bigger the cage, the better it gets for him.
He's got to punch his way in for a long way against Sean. Sean's got a pretty big reach advantage.
Sean's one of those guys where it's, insane to see someone be able to fight on the back step this well.
Yeah.
And it's really tough for, someone like Jan who will be punching up the whole time. And I kind of, there's a part of me where I'm like, I shouldn't be picking Sean O'Malley to win. But I think that he has the bigger... He has the bigger thing to go for him in this that will make him want to get the win. Where Jan is just in there to fight because that's in his DNA. Like O'Malley, there's just something about it where I'm like, this motherfucker could do it. And that's why I kind of want to keep leaning towards him.
I might actually put money on Ricky. He's got the stuff.
He's got the stuff. It'll be super interesting watching the two styles play out against each other, whereas Jan is super covered all the time, elbows close, and
very old school.
This kind of, but when you look at Cheeto, Sean also did not have a fun time with Cheeto.
No.
And Cheeto's another guy who is very fundamental forward, and even you were just talking about that coverage. Mm-hmm. Jan knows how to cover. He knows how to cover for 3 rounds. He knows and that's when O'Malley ran into that defense wall with Cheeto because Cheeto was stepping in behind defense. And this is something that you start learning. It's man, a good offense can get you in, but it gets you hit. A good defense going in gets you ahead. And that's where I'm curious about Sean O'Malley. How long can his feet hold up on the back?
O'Malley's style has changed significantly since.
He's good about he pulls offline, and when he sees someone covering, he knows to punch a person's guard into place offline, and he knows how to find his knuckles on the way in. He knows his range. He knows that step. He calls his basketball fade back, but that's what it is. The way he pulls back for a drop shot, steps off, and he'll wrap his hook into places. And I'm like, man, it could be that thing where Peter Yan's defense could be.
I think we'll see.
We'll see what the defense looks like. It's not so much. It's so much Peter's offense.
Exactly. The way I'm taking it is Jan will bring him into waters he hasn't been to, and by that I mean he'll keep his guard perfect as he always does, and he'll find
I can also see Sean dancing for 15 minutes.
Sean's got to get really creative.
Exactly. Sean also doesn't know. I think he also knows that he doesn't have to win a dogfight. I think that he knows that he has 15 minutes to move around a big fucking cage and be able to point to his head. I think that we will either see a momentous highlight or we'll see him try to go we'll see how it goes later on in the fight if he is trying to look for win, just a win.
If you can say that there's a mark against Jan, it's that he does lose a lot of edge. Not necessarily gasses out, but he loses a lot of his hard edge in the later rounds.
Well, one thing I was going to say, too, is Cheeto's, like, dedicated to the finish. Because on paper, he's losing, like, every round. So if he's not getting the finish, it's like he's going to lose the fight.
I agree. I think it was. I think what happened versus Cheeto was Cheeto implementing the exact right game plan in the moment. But I don't think that before he started kicking low calf kick that the fight was really going his way. I think that the same can be said for the Munoz fight, where Munoz was definitely kicking Sean's legs, but as that second round started, right before he got eye poked, Sean was really starting to tag him. And I really think that the biggest mistake you can make against Sean is to go in there and think you're going to leg kick him and he's just going to get injured.
Yeah, he's like I think it's happened to him one time now. He's not.
Well, he's injured his two different legs in two different fights. But after Conor fought Holloway and fucked both of his knees up, he had a similar reputation of fragility. But that's not something we think about now because it's way in the rear view. But I think a lot of people view Sean as being very fragile, and I just don't think you get to the level he's at and do the kind of training he's at if you are fragile.
Right.
I just don't think you can make it to where he's at. But yeah, this to me is the most interesting matchup on this card.
Yes.
It's the most like interesting, the most unknowable. The most,
it's that fight where like everyone's like, yeah, these type of fights are cool, but
exactly.
Fight, this is what they call it.
And you really hope that
this is the people's champ fight, like when Tony and Cowboy fought, like those kind of things. It's like the people's main event. Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like these two guys can have a barn burner, and these two fights after it better be good.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to like blow, your big moment in the Coco main.
Yeah.
And then have Aljamain, Dillashaw not deliver. Not that I don't see how it could. Speaking of, Aljamain versus
you think
TJ
this fight will
Dillashaw.
deliver?
I think this is an interesting fight. It's hard to find somebody that TJ hasn't fought at 135.
Yeah,
and this is somebody who hasn't fought, and he's not fought somebody with this style in a very long time.
Mm-hmm. TJ's last fight was Sandhagen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think Sandhagen is good. He's a lot better now than he was then.
He's definitely better now.
Yeah.
And he looked a lot better in his last fight than he did against TJ. And I think that when you talk about the top five of this division, Aljamain, TJ, Jan, Sandhagen, I mean, these are fucking, incredibly talented guys.
Monsters.
Really, really talented guys. To even be amongst their company.
So beyond tough.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that Aljo's got to find the back. He's got to find the back. I don't think he can hang with TJ on the feet.
No. I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be really tough for Aljo to find takedowns on TJ. I mean, TJ's a really good striker, but he's a better wrestler.
TJ is the athlete. George St. Pierre is the athlete I think of off the top of my head. But in terms of people who are still fighting, TJ is the athlete I think of when I think of the term mixed martial artist.
Yeah,
I would say
well-rounded.
He's not an S rank in any particular category, but he's got an A or a B in everything else. He's got good grappling, good submissions. He's got great striking. But we were talking about how Aljo and TJ is going to go. I was saying that I really think that, like you were saying, I don't think it's going to be easy for Aljamain to take TJ down at all. It's really the scrambling and the clinch, the standing clinch, where Aljamain has a big strength advantage and a big opportunity to find those positions. It's not going to be a shot off of an ankle pick or something like that.
I'm curious to see how this fight initially starts because Aljamain, now that he has gone to Extreme Couture, we're starting to see an evolution that he's doing more than just stuff on the feet. And what I mean by that is Aljamain's very comfortable, like you just said, clinch fighting. Mm-hmm. When it comes to actually outside being in a fight, the more a striking fest goes on, the more lost he gets. And you kind of see the look on his face of a wrestler trying to try out for the swim team, and he's just like, I got a doggy paddle? Fuck. He kind of falls behind on the feet, but he's so good at darting his way into the clinch that once he's in there, he's like, okay, fuck, now we're getting to work.
That's almost where I see him having the advantage in this particular fight because
on the outside
if TJ's he goes to these big hooks.
Yeah.
When he gets into a firefight, he starts throwing these looping hooks.
Ferris wheel style.
And,
TJ's starting to stay in front.
Really good wrestler. You're set yourself up for failure.
And I wonder if like TJ's wrestling is gonna like lead him astray where he might feel too good. He's like, yeah, go ahead and shoot on me, dude. Like, don't do that with Aljo. Like, because I think what's gonna happen is that what'll happen is TJ will try to stop this shot heavier than he has to. And something I'm big on telling people is like, look, if you feel like someone puts up that wall, just go around the wall. Like, stop trying to attack the base. If you run into someone's hips and it's like, oh, fuck that, then you run out to the back, and that's where Aljo wants to go. So TJ, I hope, like, you know, TJ doesn't try to get too ballsy, and like you said, go for those big hooks and sit in front, because like Aljo's not going to go for a double. He's going to go for a body shot to a back take, and that's what I am.
I think TJ's classic combo of like fake, like level change fake shot, long jab into a head kick setup will pop up. The same thing he hit Cody with twice. I think that will come up. I think that will be an issue. The head kicks in general are something
he
that
blitzes together combinations well.
Exactly.
That is going to make Aljo run into shots on the outside. Like,
and you remember Aljo the last time Aljo got knocked out?
Yeah, it was when he was coming out from that body kick. Marlon Moraes for that body kick. Oh, he was going in for the shot, and Marlon Moraes for the body kick. And Aljo, like Aljo has no shot recognition, as in like he has no idea what the fuck is coming at him. He's like, oh, if someone's punching me, I should check. Like that's how his brain reads on the outside. So I'm curious at how like TJ, like he has to go to his roots of blitzing off and switch hitting off combinations. He has to attack high, medium, low at different parts, step off, high, medium, low again, and kind of overload Aljo on the outside.
What do you guys think about TJ's legacy, if you will, now that he's had the PED suspension, come back from it? In my opinion,
man, fuck, let him take steroids.
In my opinion,
be way more entertaining.
I agree, but in my opinion, he doesn't look physically or athletically much different than he did pre-suspension. I genuinely believe that the suspension was the result of him trying to get to 125.
Yeah.
He cut some corners to try to get to 125 and got caught, and he fucking took it like a man, didn't dispute it, just sat out, came back against Sandhagen, and to me, he looked like same old 135 TJ Dillashaw.
Yeah. I think that TJ, man, I kind of want to see TJ get that belt back. I didn't like TJ much. I mean, I've kind of been like hit or miss, but like I like TJ as a champ more than Aljo as a champ. That's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, if the steroids made him look a lot.
No, it was a diuretic. Well, it was he did the EPO. No,
this is
on everything.
This is TJ this morning,
and this is clean.
And he's like the most tested guy in the company right now.
Yeah, if he looks like that clean.
Yeah. You guys can go to Instagram to see TJ's pre-weigh-in picture. It looks fucking
if he looks like that clean, bro, he's good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he was on mainly like diuretics, and like his blood cell counts were getting down, so he did the EPO stuff to kind of like he tried to cheat the system and it backfired.
My only weird thing about TJ that I noticed is when I went down the rabbit hole of watching his fights. Why does he do the hand thing every time he goes for a takedown?
What, where he brings his hands back to his head?
No, it's like he does like a specific like hand motion.
Almost like a salute.
Yeah, and then goes for, and it's every time he does like this little salute
to put something
thing
between he and the object he's shooting at. I think it just reminds him like to not like the higher your hands are for the entry of your shot, the tighter they'll be to you. If you start your shot and your hands are down here, you're staying back here.
It's kind of MMA thinking.
It's kind. I tell you, it's kind of like a roller coaster ride. Like if you go to the top, like let's say like you go to the top of a roller coaster, and we're at the point where we drop our hands. That's like putting an anchor down on that roller coaster. Like you're not going to go down the same. But if your hands are high when you start going down to that dip, you're going to have a better penetration step through and just one or two more options. So I think he does that as just like a little like, I need all my shit with me on the way in.
Better chain wrestling options.
Better chain wrestling. And it's a really small thing that I've seen right there. Like, because if his hands are a little away,
you mainly don't want to come at, especially in MMA and wrestling, you don't want to come at him like Frankenstein. You don't want to be trying to like grab him up like this. So he's trying to work in a tighter frame. And I think that
Trevor's like, you don't headbutt their chest. What are you talking about?
I think that is part of it though, because when he shoots,
don't fucking just tackle it.
When he shoots like that, that's hitting them too.
Yeah.
It's like one extra thing fucking driving through them. You know,
it gives him like, he does a good job of stepping in with like an elbow. He has like this little like rhino block inside, and he'll step in and he'll put that elbow in front of your face, and he's like, where are you gonna go? You definitely can't come right here, but I can go there. Like he has a lot of funny little like steering options.
Now I like TJ winning because I like him versus Jan a lot. And I like him versus O'Malley less but I like it still.
I still like it.
Because I think it would be very entertaining press conferences.
Yeah.
That's two personalities that like cannot coexist in the same room for sure.
Yeah.
Because TJ has to be the alpha dog wherever he goes, you know? And Sean like makes fun of people that are like that, you know? So,
I think TJ wrecks both of those fighters.
I do too.
I think he wrecks them.
But
I think him and Aljo are much more, you know, just because of their styles, I still think TJ's the better fighter. But I think because of their styles, they'll be much more, you know, of a good fight. But I think TJ just runs through Jan and you know.
I kind of do too. I kind of tend to agree with you, but I think he has to do that now. I think he needs to have the next 5 fights go his way and be very devastating.
To not be questioned.
Exactly.
To not be questioned.
Exactly.
And I
to
fall
submit
in that,
himself.
I somewhat disagree with you guys. I fall into the category of people who are questionable of him. And I know it wasn't like steroids that he was taking, but like you're cheating.
Yeah,
like,
I definitely agree.
He's definitely
like
cheating.
cheating's cheating. Like when John Jones, it came out John Jones was on some shit.
Yeah, cheating
that
is
was
cheating,
like
bro.
you're no longer the GOAT in my eyes.
Yeah.
Like in my eyes, John Jones was the undisputed greatest of all time fighter ever. Like now you're not. Like
Now it's GSP, right?
Yeah.
Just by default.
By default. GSP as in, not as in like the greatest fighter, but as in the most revolutionary martial artist. Like he made people have to change the game. Like he changed the game so people had to change.
Yeah.
Because he decided to like, I'm going to be a completely all-around fighter. Other people had to do it too. Whereas before him, you were seeing people who were, you know, one-dimensional, still destroying people. Like that's once GSP came around, that stopped all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, made everyone stop treating every practice like a wrestling practice, which like you do need that, but like you can tell like a lot of people, he was like, y'all motherfuckers are going too hard for no reason. Like, and he changed the game for not just martial arts training, but like game planning and how to take care of yourself and the athletic conditioning behind it. It was no longer just training to be strong, it was training to be a better athlete.
Or to be well-rounded. To be well-rounded in every aspect. So,
yeah.
I mean, he's the GOAT as far as that goes to me.
He also proved that you don't have to wrestle your whole life to be good at wrestling.
Yeah.
Which was not known at that time.
That's very interesting.
Nobody knew that at the time. People thought, oh, if I didn't start wrestling when I was 8 years old, I'll never wrestle at the high level.
Well, you see that, wrestlers see that in high school. You know, you see the guys who are duds, right? They've been wrestling forever. They think they're going to be great because they make the state champion. Yeah, they get like they get like 4th or 5th place in the state champion their freshman year, state championship their freshman year. Then they don't even make states their junior and senior year, and it's because you can't fill the cup; it's already full. You get these people who are just like born athletes, and they don't know that they're going to be good at it.
They get carried high. Like you saw that, like Winterton would see an athlete on a different sport in the school and be like, "You need to come to the wrestling room."
Yeah,
and then like you would see guys like come in as juniors and be back-to-back state champs and get a college scholarship. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, I came in wrestling from, like, middle school and, like, elementary school, and I was like, yo, I'm just not, like, I'm just not like these guys. Like, I knew it.
And Faraz gets a lot of the credit for the innovation of George St. Pierre, but who had a lot to do with the grappling aspect of it is Danaher.
Oh, yeah.
That was really
one of, like,
Danaher's
like, first projects, yeah.
Definitely his coming out party as far as a coach goes was all the success he had with GSP. But yeah, I kind of agree with you that there is a shadow over TJ's legacy in his career because there's no way for us to, the public thinks there's no way for us to know that he wasn't cheating in all those other fights. But if the UFC want to know that, they keep all those samples, so they could just test them now. Yeah. But they're not going to do that because they don't want to make a bad situation worse. Yeah. You know, the UFC is not like the MLB or the NFL where they make a significant amount of money to avoid these legal issues of people doing PEDs. The UFC's PED system is a PR device. It's a PR device to make people think that everything's all Gucci and good, and it's just like the NFL. It's just like the NBA. Whatever. But the situation is when the Brock situation happened and Brock came back, they waived their fucking rules.
Yeah.
That was so beat up.
When John got fucking popped the first time, they reported it, they were on it, they had it reported like hours before the fight. The second time John got popped, very little pop about it, very little. And now they've made a new policy where they don't even have to disclose the test results or the pops. So now you have guys that have just not fought in like 2-3 years, and you're like, why hasn't this guy fought in 2 or 3 years? And it's because he's probably suspended, we don't know.
Yeah.
You know, that situation has been rapidly changing because the UFC
So I see you're back from your second break. Yeah, you know, it's got to take some time off for yourself.
The UFC doesn't have to
piss in a cup enough times so you don't get caught.
The UFC doesn't have to answer to USADA. USADA answers to the UFC and gets paychecks from the UFC. That's why Conor hasn't been tested in this year. In this calendar year, he's not been tested.
He's looking like he's on that Liver King
He's
diet.
on that fucking yacht doing.
He's on the Liver King
He's on that yacht in international waters, eating fucking horse meat for 3 meals a day, and shooting up every fucking steroid in the world. And looking crazy on the yard, puffed up like a fucking balloon, and USADA's just like counting their money in the corner while that shit's going on in the background.
I can't imagine Conor's brain on testosterone. I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, that man's already a lunatic. I can't imagine what's going through his brain.
Yeah, when
like,
you're doing TRT and coke,
in bathrooms on coke. So.
You're doing TRT and coke in the bathroom and coming
I know
out
what that
and
headspace feels
everyone.
like, and dude, it's amazing. But like, Conor's brain has to be a special type of place.
Dude, yeah, for real, the Willy Wonka of this shit. All right, so main event time. Let's get into it. Let's talk about Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira. Do Bronx versus the second coming of Khabib for the undisputed lightweight title. We've alluded to it. We've talked about it in little snippets and bits. But obviously, this is an extremely interesting matchup for the lightweight division and the future of the lightweight division. Will Khabib's reign spiritually continue through his protege, or will Oliveira get it done?
The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit of Dagestan.
I agree. Yeah, that's exactly what Khabib's dad, Khabib, and Islam are. I don't quite see how Oliveira gets it done unless he's just meaner, nastier, harder, and finishes Islam quick.
So
quick, fast, and in a hurry.
You're betting on Makhachev for this one?
I would not bet on this fight because it's one of those fights where I genuinely believe it is very, very close. But if Islam is what they say he is, then Charles is in for the hardest fight of his life. Because this is like fighting the diet Khabib, right? So if you beat this guy, there's only one other guy out there for you.
I'm curious if Islam can make Charles sit still. Because
that's a big thing,
it's
right?
It's wild to
Charles
watch
is
Charles.
chaotic.
He's so chaotic. How everywhere he goes, he's just on to the next fucking thing. And what I love about it is that young Charles would throw a hook at the wrong time. Now he throws perfect shots that have perfect follow-ups and perfect missed opportunities to create openings. He's always on to the next thing. And where Islam is always kind of focused on the one thing at a time. Islam, he's a bit more educated on the feet, but I feel because his approach is just try and get to that guy's body, Islam's going to get glitched a little bit. And I want to see what happens to Islam when he has to keep shooting back into a bee's nest.
Man.
You know what I would never do? I would never chase a bee's nest. I've been there, tried that, fuck that. It really discourages you. I don't think that Islam is seeing stuff in the mat room that Oliveira is going to be hitting him with.
And Oliveira's been in the fire, bro. He's gotten cracked.
I think.
So besides wrestling, I
think Islam also is a bit more aware that he's a human compared to Khabib.
I agree with that too.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Like, if you ever watch what I was talking about Frankensteining people, Khabib just did that.
Yeah.
He just literally walked at people like this, and for some reason that worked. And nobody really knows why.
Islam actually does
Islam
does strike in. You'll see Islam punch in.
They say he's a better striker.
He's a better striker to set up his shots.
But I would say
it's not that hard.
I would say you become a better striker because you're so
confident of where you're going to go to. Because he wants to just touch that body. His striking, also you won't see Islam go for a level change like Khabib would. People were terrified of Khabib's level change, where Islam is going to strike up top because he just wants to grab right below your shoulders. And that's where you see him punch to put his right leg in between so he can re-punch, and he'll kind of just sneak his foot outside. He'll force people to switch stances to go southpaw to put his foot outside. He'll beat footwork angles to set up his body lock entries. And he just knows he'll go into people's bees' nests I talk about. But what I've seen from Islam's entries is that no one else was able to strike at the ranges that Oliveira has. He is so goddamn long, and he will strike you here and here and here and just past. Like, every step, like, he built such a wall, it's like, everywhere you're going to put your face at, you're going to run into something.
That's
nothing
what I
like,
noticed in the Poirier
like I don't
fight.
think that, wait, what?
That's what I noticed in the Poirier fight. Poirier was doing a lot of boxing while, like, Oliveira
Just boxing.
he was doing just boxing while Oliveira was just doing everything.
However he could damage you.
However, any opening he had, like how you told me, looks-y do, like he was just doing that.
Yeah, I think that Oliveira, the strength of schedule and the people that he's faced and the things that he's gone through in his UFC career, they speak for themselves, and that's really the big separating factor for me. That's what makes it very, very, very close. And I would love nothing more than to see him win, because like I agree with Trevor that it is high efficiency to low entertainment value fighting.
Yeah.
But how efficient is it?
I don't think it's going to, with Islam, I don't think it's that efficient. I think that he's the off-brand Khabib, yeah, but...
We have Habib at home. Habib at home.
He's like, watching all of his fights, he's sloppy.
I agree.
He shoots himself
a lot of
into
stiffness.
awful submissions. He shoots
The
himself
single
into
collar tie, I'm going to be really interested when Oliveira touches him with the single collar tie first. And I want to see if Islam reacts like a wrestler or a Muay Thai guy, because if he reacts like a wrestler, then he's getting his shit.
He's gonna bait.
elbowed in.
He's gonna bait the knee.
You think so?
Oh yeah, that's what he does every time he's standing in the clinch. I just showed Leak this morning. He is going to intentionally feed his head. He's going to feed his head down and let Charles think like, "Hey, knee me in the face. Why don't you knee me?"
But Oliveira's going to elbow him there. I don't think Islam is going to be okay with that. Like,
I would hope
that single collar tie I was talking about. Like, if Islam tries to swim back in and turn that into a wrestling match, or like because like we were talking about that where he makes people put that knee up and he goes for that sweep, where it's like Oliveira's going to be like, well, I'm not going to give you my fucking leg.
I would hope Oliveira's watched at least one of his fights on tape.
Yeah.
So I would hope that he wouldn't do that. But I'm just saying that's Islam's biggest tool in the standing clinch, is that he's very good at making people throw a strike and then immediately fucking tossing them on their head.
Oliveira kind of reminds me of, like, you guys ever seen that movie Highlander where they cut someone's head off and they get their power and stuff? Like, Oliveira's like that, but he just... I forgot that. Like, it's like he keeps absorbing people's habits. Like, you know, you really see his past run play into the fighter that he is now, where he is like, he will recognize someone's pressure, he'll bring more pressure. He recognizes someone's like strikes and counter fights, like he will fight to their fight and better. And you see him just kind of like keep absorbing people's skill sets. And I think that, man, I just see Islam getting so wrecked, and I see Khabib eating the saddest bowl of Cheerios. I mean, I really do.
The saddest plate of tiramisu.
Like, cause he'll be crying, going like, "These #1 bullshit. I'm not happy with tiramisu." Like, it's gonna happen. Like, I feel like we're gonna see Islam get utterly humiliated.
Hold on, brother.
I
I'm
think
crying
so too.
Yeah.
I think that it's gonna.
Like, Khabib's gonna sit there like, "What do you mean not perfect?"
It's
like,
one of those fights where Islam's got to prove himself,
and that's gonna get him fucked up.
His opponents, like his record, doesn't show greatness. His record shows him beating people who he should beat.
Yeah.
You know. Oliveira's record shows greatness. It shows that he struggled and has overcome and is continuing to smash.
I tell that people
his run has
all
been
the
insane.
time.
His run is crazy.
Like, just from the time he won the title to now, it's been like, whoa. Like, how can you get this much better every single fight? It's like, him versus Poirier, I was like, come on now. I like Charles, but, you know, there's just no way. Like, Dustin's going to spark. And it's just like, holy shit, he beat Dustin and out-violenced Dustin.
Yeah.
Also,
it's like, damn!
When he puts people in submission attempts, people don't get away.
That's true.
People don't get away. And Islam puts himself in very, very dangerous submission spots. Like, he shoots his way into guillotines almost every fight. And you shoot yourself into a guillotine against Oliveira, you're getting slept. Like, it's going to happen. And if you try to stand and bang with Oliveira, he's too long, he's too hard, you're getting, you're
And if you rock him, now you have to crawl on top of him.
It's more about, with
Yeah.
Islam, it's more about what we don't know about him.
We don't.
Than what we do know about Oliveira. We
Yeah.
know about Oliveira because his resume has been on display for all the world to see for 10 years.
Yeah.
whereas Islam's a relatively newcomer, and it's like, this is the fight where I hope we find out, and I hope it's not just one-sided.
The reason
Islam
I don't
running
believe it's going to be like his proving himself fight is just because of the way his other fights look. Yes, he's dominating, like he's absolutely dominating, but he's sloppy at it. You know, it's slop all over the place. I don't think it's at that level yet. Whereas, like, you know, you talk about
Khabib.
not Khabib. How am I blanking on his name now?
His opponent?
No, Chimaev.
Oh,
yeah.
When you look at his, like, yeah, he hasn't had that many fights in the UFC, but you look at the fights he's had in the UFC, never even hit, you know, never even hit. And then he goes against the number 3 guy and still continues to not dominate, but
The top's
to
the top
win.
for a fucking reason.
Yeah,
Like,
he's at that top, but his fights show that he's, you know, top level. He's not just dominating these people. He's not even being punched. You know, it's super crisp takedowns. He's not getting into submission attempts. He's not, you know, putting himself in danger. Whereas, yeah, you know, this fight, all of his past fights, he's been put in danger a lot. He's been put in submission attempts almost every fight. And he puts himself there. It's not that, like, you know, these people are hitting a slick submission. No, he's shooting his way.
he's just so confident.
He's so confident. It's like that confidence is a great thing until you're overconfident in a guy who's an absolute sniper as far as submissions
his biggest asset is that as long as he's been wrestling, he's also been wrestling with strikes and strikes on the ground. And that helps with that confidence of always doing, like, excelling at one thing, but doing
fucking Sambo tournament.
I fucking
out there in the fucking blue gi.
But like that's really it. It's like not only like so he kind of has like that it just works for him. And and guess what? Like tough titties. This is MMA. Like it's just not going to be. We're going to see Islam's face change where he's like, you mean I can't just smash? Like what is this?
Well, see, but that's when we'll see. This is when we'll see what he's
like,
really made of.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll see what he's really
like.
made
I'm
of.
also saying this as like I will not be surprised if I'm sitting here nodding off at 6 in the afternoon because Islam has wrestle fucked his way to a world title. Could that happen? You know what? Sure, probably.
I think that's an
and it's still probably an absolute possibility.
Absolute
but like,
possibility.
there's also that part of me. I'm just like, I can just see Oliveira making it look fucking.
At this
easy
point,
on
it's hard to
Saturday.
doubt Oliveira after what we've seen him do. It's just very hard to picture.
He has an event like Islam. We don't know how he fares against top 5.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Oliveira
my
has
biggest
the
thing, is
unknown
that
of this,
decisively beat every top 5 person.
Like it kind of sounds like the entire nation of Dagestan is like, yeah, I saw my buddy knock a guy out at the bar. Like he's a great fighter no matter what. Like everyone in Dagestan is like, we're all great fighters. He's a great fighter. We just know he's gonna do that. And I'm like, there's like blissful ignorance can go the right way and the wrong way. And I think that like, you know, it has steered him to winning all these other times. It's like that confidence of greatness, but I think that his overconfidence is gonna steer him into a bad time. Like there's just like this is one of those things where it's like I'll honestly put money on Oliveira instead of like betting on like the Jan O'Malley fight or something like that. Like that's like one of those few times where I'm like, I can really honestly just put money on Oliveira.
I just can't see how he wrestles his way out of this one.
Yeah,
I figure he wrestles his way into a bad time.
Exactly.
That's
like
how I see this fight.
Yeah.
Anything in Charles's guard is a bad time.
Yeah,
It's true.
You go to take him down and you wind up in his guard. It's not the place to be.
Yeah, you have to take him down in a way where you're passing immediately to half or better.
Or on his back,
Yeah.
Oh, Dylan. There was. I remember earlier you were talking about how Dagestani wrestling is kind of coming out of like a small niche part of the world, and it kind of reminded me of like when Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was starting. It was coming out of like a small area, and it became the most dominant thing in MMA. And so well, now we have Dagestani wrestling. So that's kind of like a similarity.
Yeah, especially when you talk about the Gracies.
Right.
The Gracies were, the Machados and the Gracies were the only source of knowledge for jiu-jitsu. And now it's been 30 years, and there's been a huge dissemination, and hundreds of black belts have been made in that time. And now we have many American jiu-jitsu teachers that are like
former collegiate wrestlers.
Yeah,
well.
that too. And you have kids that are black belts at 17 now because they've been training their entire lives in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so maybe in 30 years from now, we will see the Dagestani style grappling mechanics and even maybe a bigger appreciation and respect and reverence for Sambo in the U.S. You know, I think
I
that
fucking hope so. I think it's a great sport.
we talked about this last time we were talking about Islam, but yeah, I think that Sambo is a really, really good gateway to MMA. I think it's a better gateway to MMA than doing jiu-jitsu tournaments for sure.
Yeah.
I would say that doing Muay Thai and kickboxing is a great gateway to MMA.
You and I have been talking about that. Like, we want to train these guys that want to do MMA. It's like we're going to have them get ready for a Sambo competition. It's like
for whatever Sambo competition we can find, we're definitely going to be putting guys in there, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's a really, really nice way to test the waters, and it's safer than being in a regular amateur MMA fight. You know, there's points. There's a very
like that,
concrete system
like
of scoring.
That always fighting to those good fundamental habits has gone a long way for everyone coming from like the Eastern Bloc areas and past from Dagestani. Like, and that's what I said of like that. He's not only been wrestling; he's been punching and kicking to help his wrestling. He's been taking people down to punch people and getting punched on the ground.
Another small little tiny factor between then and now is the internet.
Yeah.
And the Dagestani handcuff has been broken down on like 55 YouTube channels by expert grapplers who have gone into great detail and shown every little piece of it, whereas we could just never have that.
Today I'm duct taping myself to a bear to learn how to beat a Dagestani.
So I think that I think that it is coming from a very like small funnel, but as that funnel reaches and the bucket begins to fill up, that knowledge begins to like disseminate its way around. It'll be very, very common for guys to be prioritizing positions like the Dagestani ride or the Dagestani wrist ride or handcuff over traditional systems, because I think a lot of the systems in MMA are still reliant on old jiu-jitsu mentality of like, well, you need to get the back with the hooks in, and it's like, why? That's what you need to do, bro. Like, you know, that's just what we do. But we're starting to realize that that's not like the be-all, end-all of control. There's other systems of control, and I think that Habib especially is a guy you never see go hooks in. But if he gets on your back, you're going to go out.
You're going to go out.
Yeah, and he has a very, you know, like that. Like I was showing you, carry all your weight over them, and different ways to lock people down than just what we've been taught is like the most correct option.
I thought that you just made me think about something too that Trevor was saying about how Islam is sloppy and maybe a little bit more sloppier with his wrestling than Khabib.
Mm-hmm.
When Khabib choked out Gaethje, he actually went and changed to a different submission to not break his arm.
Yeah.
And that's just such a high level of grappling to even have that
Awareness.
option with somebody as dangerous as Justin Gaethje.
And to know, like, this guy's a fucking animal and is not going to tap.
It's not going to tap.
Like, I know this guy well enough, even though this is our first time meeting, I know him well enough to know he's not going to tap.
And I don't want to hurt him, so let me choke him a different way.
He's got Michael Johnson in that fucking Kimura, and he's begging him to tap.
Yeah.
You know, that's always been a moment that stuck out with me. He's like, he's begging you to tap out so he doesn't have to break your arm. And that's pretty crazy too. And then for him to just be like, I'm not even going to go for that because Gaethje's not going to listen to reason. If I ask him nicely to tap, he's not going to even hear me. He's going to be out the bottom just foaming at the mouth trying to get up. So, yeah. But I'm so excited for this weekend's fights, guys. I am commentating Toro Cup during the first half of the day, so I don't know exactly how much of the main card I'll see live, but as soon as Toro Cup's in, I'm fucking racing over here. Are we still watching here?
Yeah, that's my plan. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, Leek, Trevor.
Can you guys make it by on Saturday to watch fights?
I'll be in Cherokee.
Cherokee?
Yeah.
What time?
Gabe's bachelor thing. That's why I'm going to be out for 4 days.
The main card starts at 2.
They
Prelims
got,
start
like,
at 10 a.m.
Giant sports betting screen, and we're going to sit in the recliners and
sick.
put like $1
Now
on the
that
fight.
sounds fun.
That sounds amazing.
That sounds much more fun. Okay, cool. So, guys, thanks very much for joining us on the show. Trevor, good luck in your upcoming bout and getting ready, brother.
Good luck, Trevor.
Guys, thanks so much for tuning into the show. Until next time, enjoy yourselves and the fights.